It's now 10 o'clock, so we will start, and I'd just like to warm welcome, whether warm's the right word or not, I don't think so, but however, welcome to Development Standards this morning. Do we have any apologies?
No apologies, convener.
Declarations of interest? I'll start off. I'm making a declaration of interest for agenda item 7, land adjacent to Abbey Bank House, Springfield Terrace, Arbroath, application number 20/00395. I'm very familiar with one of the speakers and have been for a long time, so I'll leave the room and pass this one over to the Vice Chairman. Any other apologies? I mean, declarations of interest, sorry, declarations of interest, yes.
Councillor Durno, convener.
Councillor Durno?
Yes, I had correspondence on the application for the Abbey House one from a constituent called Mr. Leonard, and I just wrote back and said I couldn't comment on the application because I was taking part in the meeting.
Any other declarations of interest?
Councillor King, convener.
Councillor King?
Yes, convener. Similarly, I've had communications from Mr. Cross. I haven't opened them. I haven't read them. I've merely got rid of them. So I don't actually have a declaration, but I'm just notified in the meeting I have received correspondence, which I have not read. I
probably should have included that in my declaration of interest as well. I just ignored it like Councillor King.
I mean, people should really realise they are not supposed to write to us direct. They're supposed to write to the planning office.
Okay. If there's no other declarations of interest, we'll move on.
Councillor Brace, convener.
Yes, I have similar, and I won't be filling in a declaration of interest form.
Okay.
Not necessary.
That goes for the rest of us, actually. It's exactly the same as Councillor Brace just said.
Okay, right, thank you. We'll take that. It goes across the board. No other declarations of interest? We'll move on to agenda item 3, building warrants. The committee is asked to note that during the period, the 4th of December 2020 to 29th of January 2021, a total of 132 building warrants, 1 late warrant, 1 demolition warrant, and 32 amendments to warrant have been approved with an estimated cost of £4,339,537. Is that noted?
Indeed.
Move on to agenda item 4, delegated decisions. The committee is asked to note that during the period 4th of December 2020 till the 29th of January 2021, a total of 111 planning applications have been approved, 5 refused under a scheme of delegation. Is that noted?
Noted.
Minutes of the previous meeting, agenda item 5, minutes of the previous meeting, are those approved?
Agreed.
Move on to agenda item 6. This is a planning application for a field 250 metres south of Paskelly Farm, Carnoustie. The slides, please.
Thank you, convener. As you indicate, this is an application for approval of matters specified in our planning permission in principle. This is a site where planning permission in principle has been granted for employment land and residential development. That permission was granted in December 2016. It allows for the formation of employment land and an area of residential development. So this application is seeking approval of the detailed layout, the design, the landscaping, access type matters associated with that proposal. I need to be very clear, this is not an opportunity to revisit the principle of the development. The principle has been established by the grant of the previous planning permission. Also, just to be clear, there are regulatory conditions attached to the existing planning permission in principle. Those cover matters such as noise limits associated with the employment land and noise limits associated with construction activities. So those regulatory conditions attached to the planning permission in principle remain in full effect and apply to the development that takes place on the site. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that issues regarding infrastructure capacity, specifically matters such as capacity at schools, capacity at the local health centre, those matters were considered at the time of the planning permission in principle, and again, not issues that can be revisited at this stage. Just to mention, the planning permission in principle does have a requirement that the developer makes a contribution towards education provision within the town, primary school education specifically, and a planning obligation requiring the appropriate financial contribution has been concluded. That planning obligation also deals with the delivery of affordable housing units within the site. Next slide, please.
I don't have the slides coming up actually.
I wonder if our IT host can help.
Yes. I've got a slide now anyway.
Okay, so this is an extract from the Angus Local Development Plan. You can see the purple arrow in the top left-hand corner identifies the area that's zoned in the local plan for employment development. The yellow arrow identifies the area that's zoned for residential development. So as well as having planning permission in principle, the application site is zoned for employment development and residential development. So what we're looking at is compliant with the broad principles identified within the local development plan. Both sites round about 10 hectares in area. The housing zone allocated for a development of up to 250 houses. We can have the next slide, please. And just an aerial view, again, purple tone identifies very broadly the employment area. The yellow tone or the orange tone towards the bottom of the screen identifies the general location and extent of the housing site. Features of note on this slide, just to the left-hand side, to the west of the two identified areas, we have the public road. That's the Upper Victoria Link Road. You'll see at the very top of the screen, we have the grade separated junction at Upper Victoria, and the public road runs down into Carnoustie itself. The green arrow that you can see just towards the right-hand side of the screen identifies Shanwell Cemetery. There is a core path that runs through the application site. It follows the Pitskelly farm track, connects down to the cemetery and up to the Upper Victoria Link Road, and it runs round to Carnoustie High School, which is just broadly identified by the blue arrow that you can see at the right-hand side of the screen. And if we can have the next slide, please. So the conditions attached to the planning permission in principle, condition 1A requires some whole site details in relation to the proposal, and generally it's looking for an indication of the general distribution of the uses. So you can see the purple area again just is the employment land allocation. As I say, around about 10 hectares. And the yellow arrow identifies 249 houses within the housing area itself. Other matters that were covered by the planning permission in principle for the whole site related to public transport, and the developer has entered an agreement with a local bus operating company to ensure that at an appropriate stage in the development, the site would be served by public transport. Other issues related to drainage, and a separate planning permission has been granted that allows for improvement, provision of foul sewer down the Upper Victoria Link Road, connecting into the main sewer in Carnoustie itself. So foul drainage from the development connected to the public sewerage system, and sustainable urban drainage systems used for disposal of surface water on the site itself. Can you have the next slide, please? So this is looking at the detail of the employment site itself. The two blue arrows at the bottom of the screen show the proposed access points into the employment zone from the Upper Victoria Link Road. Those have been designed to comply with the requirements of our roads colleagues to ensure safe and satisfactory access to the employment zone. The green arrow just identifies the landscaping that goes around the perimeter of the employment site itself. So you can see fairly substantial landscaping provided on all sides of the employment zone, including fairly substantial planting along the site frontage itself. So through time, certainly good screening of the employment area itself. The yellow arrow or the orange arrow just in the middle of the screen identifies 16 starter units that would be provided at a fairly early stage in the development. This is detail in relation to the proposal that shows these units provided in order to provide business opportunities for local businesses, small businesses in the area to locate or relocate to this area. Maybe just at this stage as well, draw your attention to the right-hand side of the screen, maybe just beyond the employment zone, you can see the Pitskelly farm track itself. That farm track is a core path and it's retained pedestrian linkage provided along the site frontage to connect into that. And you can see just to the left-hand side of that, we have landscaping that would separate the employment zone from the housing zone itself. Again, just draw your attention to a suds pond that would be located on the site frontage as well. So landscaping and suds pond on the site frontage to improve the general appearance of the overall development. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the starter units themselves. As I say, 16 units comprised in 8 blocks of two terrace blocks, each containing 8 units. 8 units of varying size that would meet a range of different needs. And you can see the general appearance of the building shown at the bottom of that slide. So fairly typical units that you would expect to see on an employment allocation. General design acceptable, and certainly in the context of the overall landscaping that's been provided, no issue with the general appearance, or indeed with the nature of the broad use that they could facilitate. Next slide, please. So the other whole site issue that we've been asked to consider is the zoning, the phasing of the development. And you can see this is the works that are proposed within year 1. So this plan is supplemented by condition 4 of the report that's before you. And the condition or the requirements of condition 4 require early delivery of key aspects of the employment zone. So one of the things the planning permission in principle and the land allocation we're seeking to do were to ensure that we have not just housing development, but we have the employment land delivered at the same time to ensure that it delivers the economic benefits that were considered at the time of the grant of the planning permission in principle. So within the first year, we're seeing the provision of the roads that you see identified in blue. So that's roads that go into the housing zone, the principal route into the housing zone, the 2 accesses serving it. You also see the provision of the southerly most of the 2 accesses into the employment zone. We have the provision of all the landscaping associated with the employment zone. So that's to ensure the landscaping is provided at an early stage and that there's opportunity for that to mature and develop as development takes place within the site itself. You also see the suds pond within the employment area delivered also at an early stage in the development. Also worth mentioning on that slide, we have housing development within the year one, the first phase of the development. That's providing 25 mainstream houses and 39 affordable houses. So affordable housing delivered within the scheme at a fairly early stage in the development proposal. Next slide, please. So if we look now at the residential zone, this is an aerial view with the housing superimposed upon it. You can see in the blue arrows identify the two access points coming in off Upper Victoria. The green arrow at the left-hand side of the screen shows landscaping adjacent to the Pitskelly Farm track, the core path. Again, providing a soft edge to the core path and providing a buffer between the housing and the employment zone that would lie just to the north of that. The orange arrow in the centre of the screen identifies a play park, an open space area provided within the central area of the site. You can perhaps make out the houses generally front onto that, so it's an area that's got good natural supervision. It's well overlooked by the surrounding area to ensure that it's used safely and appropriately. Red arrow in the centre of the screen shows a further amenity area. This is a landscaped area with seating areas in it. You'll notice the road loops round that, and that's to provide, in the longer term, a bus turning area within the site. Bus stop also located within the central area, and we have some single-storey properties located around that general area. Green arrow at the bottom of the screen shows a fairly substantial landscaped edge to the development sitting between the houses and the Upper Victoria Link Road. That's around about 20 to 40 metres in width, and providing a linear parkland type feature along the site frontage. Again, reflecting that the development is on the edge of the town and providing a soft edge as you come down the Upper Victoria Link Road. You can just make it out on this slide, but there, again, in the vicinity of that green arrow, there is a line of planting that's heading down to the bottom of the screen, and that's compensatory planting. There are some trees to be felled in order to provide the development, and this is compensatory planting off-site. It provides a green corridor that links the linear parkland area to the fairly substantial planting that was provided on the urban fringe of the town when the improvements to the A92 and the new Upper Victoria Link Road were provided. Now, I wonder if the IT host can maybe just move this slide a little bit to the right-hand side. Thank you, that's perfect. So we have a green arrow just at the right-hand side of the screen. And again, you can see that identifies the core path that's running up into Pitskelly Farm. You can see just above that arrow, to the east of the arrow, there is a large parkland area. That's about half a hectare, so providing a kickabout area. Again, the houses front onto that, so there's some natural supervision of it. And we have planting down the side of the core path, again, just to provide a softer edge to the development. The core path, the parkland area, linking to the area round about the Shanwell Cemetery, and the core path that continues along to the high school. Can I have the next slide, please? So a range of house types provided within the development, fairly standard house types for a modern housing development. We have a range of semi-detached terrace properties, single story, and they provide a range of 2 and 3 and 4 bedroom properties within the mainstream housing that we're seeing here. Again, coloured so that they're appropriate to the rural nature of the site. We don't have white houses. These are more earthy tones, which are more reflective of the house colours, traditional house colours in and around Carnoustie. Next slide, please. And again, in terms of the affordable housing, we have a mix of semi-detached and terrace properties. We also have some flatted dwellings within this, 2-storey flatted dwellings, so cottage style flats with 1 flat on the ground floor and another flat on the upper floor. And again, we have some single story properties. Those are designed as wheelchair accessible properties within the development. So in very broad terms, we have 1 and 2 bedroom properties. That's about 30% of the mix within the development. We have 3-storey properties. That's about 40% of the mix within the development. And we have larger 4-bedroom properties, and that's about 30% of the mix. So we have a reasonable mix between small, medium, and larger properties within the overall development. Next slide, please. These are just, again, some images of the development. This is looking at the site frontage. So you can see the linear parkland that would sit between the housing development and the houses themselves. Upper Victoria Link Road, separated from the housing by this parkland. Again, on the top slide, you can see cycle path provided up the edge of the Upper Victoria Link Road, and you can perhaps also make out footpaths provided within the parkland area itself, but substantial planting along that frontage. And again, the bottom image in that slide just shows the access point, walling just to provide a feature as you enter the development itself. Next slide, please. This is within the development on the primary route that goes through the development. You can see we have hedges and metal fencing just to provide a degree of enclosure to the front garden. So this is not open plan on the primary routes. On the secondary routes, there are open plan areas, but on the primary route, we have the enclosure provided by the hedging and the metal railings. Again, we have a number of parking solutions within the development. Some of it is in curtilage, some of it is designed so that we have parking courts just to reduce the overall dominance of the car within the development. On the bottom slide, you can see some wall detailing. So again, at prominent locations, prominent corner locations, we have walls just to provide that slightly higher quality boundary treatment to avoid timber fences in particularly prominent locations, which is a feature that we've seen in some of our housing developments. Next slide, please. So looking at the open space areas, top one shows the central play area, again enclosed by hedging. You can see the houses overlooking that area. The open space provision designed to meet the requirements of council policy, and the detailed specification of that agreed with our colleagues in the landscape services team. So we have high quality planting throughout the development and on the boundaries of the development, and we have open space areas that are overlooked by the housing round about them. Bottom slide there just shows the bus turning facility. So again, designed to be enclosed by hedges and landscaped with some trees that provide a sense of character, a sense of identity to this particular part of the development. Bus infrastructure provided at this location, so we have a bus stop, and you can see single-storey properties surrounding this particular area. Next slide, please. So just again, looking at the housing zone, as I say, access is designed to meet the requirements of our roads colleagues, so we're providing good, safe access. We're connecting into the core paths that are in the vicinity of the site. We are providing open space areas that meet the requirements of council design guidance, council standards, and we're providing substantial landscaping and open space provision in association with the development. We have a good range of house types within the proposal to meet a range of housing needs, and the affordable housing specification has been designed to meet the requirements identified by our colleagues in the housing service. So overall, a housing scheme which we consider is acceptable, that we provide a good living environment for future residents. Next slide, please. And just looking at the overall development again, we have the employment land, reasonably well designed, substantial landscaping provided with it, opportunities for a range of businesses to locate within that area, potential for businesses to relocate from existing employment areas in Carnoustie to improve amenity at those alternative locations. We have the housing zone, again, providing a range of house types, housing that meets an affordable housing requirement in accordance with the council's requirements. We have no objections from statutory consultees. We have no objections from our internal consultees. We have a development that provides a proposal that's allocated in our Angus local development plan. We have a proposal that creates opportunity for businesses to locate or relocate to South Angus. We have a proposal that's in accordance with the local development plan and it's recommended for approval. Thank you, Convener.
Right, thank you. Any questions to Mr. Hunter?
Convener, I'm sure there's questions. I just can't see the list at this moment in time. If you could just hold on until the presentation is removed from the screen. I can't seem to get my Zoom screen back to normal. There we go. Okay, so Councillor King and Councillor Moore, Convener.
Okay. Firstly, Councillor King.
Apologies, I should have taken my hand down.
Councillor Moore, Convener.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Convener. I have a few questions, I'm afraid. Can I just clarify, in the slide that is year one development, which is page 59 of our papers, is the orange area the affordable housing? Just for clarity.
You can give me just a second till I find the slide. No, the orange area is the mainstream housing, Councillor Moore. The affordable housing is the describe it as peach area, just to the that you see identified on that slide.
Yeah, thank you. And you said there would be compensatory planting for the trees that were removed. Would that be on a one-to-one basis?
I think you'll see in the information that accompanies the report, there's an indication that there's maybe around about 40 to 50 trees to be felled. In terms of replanting, there are several thousand trees to be planted. So it's the replanting would be on a far greater scale than one-to-one.
Wonderful. And the bus service, there's a legal agreement for a bus service for 3 years. When does that start?
Again, you'll notice in the conditions there's a requirement for that to be provided. I think it's round about the completion of the 122nd house within the development.
Right, and when's that thought to be?
I think that's round about year 2 or year 3 within the overall plan.
So that will be when that bus turning area is provided?
No, that's likely, yes.
Right.
There is facility. You'll notice that the year 1 phasing plan is quite useful in that you see the blue road that's highlighted on that provides a loop round connecting to Upper Victoria Link Road. So there is potential for buses to loop through the site without using the bus turning area.
Yeah, and just one semi-facetious comment. They're lovely pictures, but how long will it take for the trees to reach the sizes shown?
So as you know, Councillor Moore, trees take some time to reach maturity. As we've indicated, in terms of the employment zone, the requirement is for the planting to be provided very early doors within the first planting season following commencement of construction. So certainly in terms of the employment zone, the expectation is that the trees are planted and have opportunity to begin to establish before we see too much employment development within the site. And similarly, we have conditions that require the compensatory planting to the south of the site to be provided at early stages. There are a range of trees to be provided of different species and different planting stock, and that includes some heavy standards and some extra heavy standards. So there will be whips planted. Whips can take slightly better and slightly quicker, but we will have extra heavy standard trees planted at an early stage in development, and they will provide something of a framework at a fairly early stage.
Thank you very much.
You finished, Councillor Moore?
I have finished, thank you.
Any other questions to Mr. Hunter?
We have Councillors Durno, Miles and Brays, convener.
Durno. Okay, Councillor Durno. Councillor Durno.
Thanks, convener. I'd just like to ask Mr. Hunter, regarding parking, on some of these new housing estates, we've noticed that there's maybe just a facility for one car to be parked in their drive. And as you know, most people have two cars, and especially as their children have cars as well. And I know we're trying to get rid of the car at the moment and everybody be on bikes, but when we're looking at these new housing developments, and particularly because we've got a bus that's going to be going through this development and it's going to be doing a turning, can we make sure that there's enough room around about the houses so that a bus can go through? Because I'm finding in other housing developments that people are parking their cars, one in the drive, one in the road, and buses can't get through. And before we build this housing development, is a possibility that they could look at the road management structure of the estate to make sure that if cars are parked outside the houses, that a bus will be able to get through? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Durno. I can confirm that the layout, the road design and the parking provision is all designed to comply with the Council's road standards, and our roads colleagues are satisfied that the primary access route can accommodate a bus. As I indicated in the presentation, we have a range of parking solutions within the development. So on the primary route, the northern section of the primary route in particular, there are parking courts provided that seek to take the majority of the cars away from the main spine road, if you like. There is parallel parking provided for visitors within that spine road as well. So there is an attempt to design the proposal to reduce the prominence of the car, and at the same time that should hopefully aid movement through the development.
Councillor Miles. Councillor Miles, do you have questions?
Yeah, I tried to, but it muted me again. Yeah, I remember this application when it came through the first time, and I expressed my disappointment at the loss of prime agricultural land. But my question is there any concern with over-provision due to the proposed development on the northeastern boundary of Carnoustie? We've got, has there been a demand for this, both the employment site and the housings?
So we have two employment sites in Carnoustie. We have the planning permission that's approved at Carlogie, and we have the site that we're looking at here at Pitskelly. At the time of the adoption of the Angus Local Development Plan, Council determined that it wanted to see both sites allocated. So we have the two allocated employment sites in Carnoustie. Whether both come forward, I guess, will be dependent in part upon the market and developer end user interest. But certainly we have an indication from the applicant in this case that they have demand for the employment land, and we have a clear indication that they intend to develop it. And as I've indicated, we have phasing conditions that require the infrastructure to serve it to be provided at a fairly early stage, so that we don't just have a field of housing on the edge of the town. In terms of housing numbers, the housing numbers, the 249 units that are proposed, form part of our established housing land supply. They are taken account of because the site is allocated in the local plan. So certainly there's no over provision in relation to housing as a consequence of approval of this application.
Thank you.
Councillor Brace?
Yes, thanks, convener. Yes, Mr. Hunter, you described the employment area as reasonably well designed. I just wondered if you had any, if you could maybe elaborate a wee bit more on that.
So at the moment, some of the detail that we have in relation to that area is indicative. The actual makeup of that zone will be determined in part by end user demand, end user requirements, and those aspects will require further applications to come back for approval. So at the moment we have an access at the south of the site, we have potential for the loop through the site, and perhaps my choice of words was unfortunate. I think the design is acceptable, the landscaping provision is reasonably generous, and it will ensure that we have a site on the edge of the town that has a reasonably good amenity. It's an employment area, you know, that type of area by virtue of its general nature, you know, can have visual impacts. It can affect someone's impression of a town as they approach it. But the landscaping here is generous, and through time, those impacts will be mitigated. So I think we have a good proposal before us.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions to Mr. Hunter?
Councillor Cheap, convener.
Councillor Cheap?
Yes, thank you, convener. Actually, just a quick point. I just want to just check that are we going to hear from the speakers today, and will there be opportunities for questions after that before? Because I don't really have a point for Mr. Hunter. It's more for the architects' representatives.
Sarah, you can answer that one.
Yes, we have two representatives with us today, Councillor Cheap, so there'll be an opportunity to ask questions.
And then comments after that, Sarah?
And then comments after that, yes.
Thank you very much, thanks.
So at this stage, we're still questions to Mr. Hunter.
Councillor Brown has a question.
Councillor Brown?
Yes. Mr. Hunter, the site looks great. It's a fantastic development. But what worries me is the amount of hedging. Now, the hedges look lovely on your photograph, but unless we are going to keep these hedges, or the council are going to do it, within 2 to 3 years, some will cut them very nice, and others I'll never see a pair of hedge shears. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I think that's a fair point, and you'll note that we have, I think it's condition 1 in the papers before you, require a scheme for the management, maintenance and retention of the hedging. The hedging is considered reasonably important in terms of creating the character within the development, and we've suggested that there might be options with that, but there is an overall landscaping maintenance programme for the open space areas within the site, and we've suggested that ideally we would like to see the hedges maintained as part of that, or some alternative method provided that ensures that they are retained and importantly maintained.
Thank you.
Any other questions to Mr. Hunter?
I think Councillor Moore may have another question, convener.
Councillor Moore, you've been with us already. Do you have another question?
Yes, thank you, convener. Just supplementary to Councillor Brown's. I'm looking, and condition 1C is regarding the hedges. But once the developer has sold the properties to whoever resides in them, is condition 1C actually enforceable?
No.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions to Mr. Hunter?
No other questions, convener.
Well, we'll move on. We don't have speakers, but we have Mr. Lee Fotheringham from Void Architects and Ewan McLaughlin from Persimmon Homes are there for questions. So, do any members have questions to any of those two gentlemen?
I think Councillor Cheap had a question, convener.
Councillor Cheap.
Thank you. Probably for Mr. Fotheringham to start off with, I think Councillor Dunrow brought up a really relevant point to this. It's one of the couple of questions I had was regarding car parking spaces per dwelling in this extensive site. It's a very relevant point Councillor Dunrow brought up. And over the last few years, we've seen development in Carnoustie of new housing developments and schemes that has been thought that there'd be adequate car parking spaces provided, but all we witness now is cars parked bumped up onto pavements round estates where there clearly isn't sufficient car parking spaces being provided with the plans. And I'm very, very keen here to and agree with Councillor Dunrow that we don't witness and miss the opportunity here to make more than adequate provision for car parking, so we don't have this quite abhorrent practice that is going on now. And certainly if there's to be a public bus trans going around there, we have to avoid this at all costs. What provision have you made, or can you guarantee to us in the designs here that there are going to be sufficient car parking spaces for I think it's 177 3 or 4 bedroom properties, which are going to generate at least 2 cars each, let's face it?
Thanks, Councillor. What I would kind of just echo really is what Mr. Hunter said in regards to the development fully complies with the road standards and parking provision that is requested. Each plot has the required amount of car parking, off-street provision, and then obviously on the primary routes we've got parking courts that take the cars even away further from there, with some visitor car parking spaces. So there really should be a low number of cars parked on the street due to these preset conditions by the standards of roads.
Okay. Okay. I think we'll have to hold you to that. I think it might be something for us to think about is for basically double yellow lines right round the whole estate would be quite good, I think, to avoid all this. And the other question I had for you really is on the planned time frame. Reading through the report, it was good seeing what's be there in year 1, etc. But I realised this is really a possibly a 5-year plan from start to completion, or possibly but maybe 6. So I'm quite keen to get an idea from you what you see as a year 1 to year 5 development here on the employment zone and on the housing development, because it's not clear to me what's coming each year as this proceeds.
Yeah, that's a fair question. There's actually on the public realm there is a 5-year plan. There's a drawing for each stage, which primarily sets out the housing, because obviously we have plans to construct that. The employment zone is driven purely by future occupants, so that kind of depends on the interest and who actually looks to go here, and also it'll be a build by interest kind of basis. But like I said, there's a detailed drawing setting out the 5-year plan of the housing development that can be sent across, anything like that to help you.
Okay, that's lovely. Thanks for that. It's clear. Just
no problem.
Any other questions at this stage? Councillor Moore, is that your hand up now, see?
Oh,
That's my
sorry,
hand up.
Councillor Durno, convener.
Yeah, Councillor Durno.
Thanks, convener. I'm not quite sure which person that this has to be directed to, but another problem I'm finding with new housing schemes is that the occupants of the new housing schemes don't realise that there is no dog bin provision allocated in new housing schemes, and that it's not the priority of the council to put them in. Could this be something that they could be looked in at the future? Because there is more dogs now than children at the moment. Another quick point is that I'd like to congratulate you on your surface water plan, your sustainable drainage system, because you have put in the plan that you're going to be making sure it's very safe. This is something that's come up on other housing schemes as well, with lots of young families nowadays. I'm really worried about the drainage systems, children being able to fall in them. So I congratulate you on the fact that you've put in that in your plan, that you're going to make sure it's very safe. So thank you. If you could consider the dog bins, that would be brilliant.
No, thank you very much. And I think in the future, that's a very good point to bring up that we'll definitely take on board. And I think myself and Mr. McLaughlin will keep that in mind moving forward.
Any other questions?
Councillor Moore, convener.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you, convener. Yes, Mr. Fotheringham, I suppose I ought to start by declaring some sort of interest, because I lived for 21 years in the brand new Persimmon house. So I know what a Persimmon estate can develop like. But there are two things. One, I'm looking at image 6, which is the bus turning area. Now, there are going to be kids around the area. Some of them are going to go and play on that. They've got to cross the road to do it. Are you going to put in any sort of markings to warn people that kids will be there? Or do you just think that because it's an estate, they'll assume there are kids around?
No, it's a good question. I think, or I know in fact, the roads department will be working with our roads engineers to make sure that all the correct infrastructure is in place to make people aware that there will be a bus turning area and any other kind of road warnings that are necessary.
Wonderful. And the other thing, which I've learned from another estate on my patch, if you put grit bins in for winter, which is very laudable for this time of year, what I found with another developer was they put the grit bins in, and then when they moved off site, they took the grit bins away, and then people were very unhappy. If you put grit bins in, can we have an undertaking that you'll leave them when you're finished?
Well, that's something that we'll take into consideration with the developer and look to put that in place for you.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Mr. Fotheringham or Mr. McLaughlin?
No other questions, convener.
Thank you. Move on to comments. Any members have comments at this stage?
Councillor Cheap, convener.
Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, thanks, convener. First of all, let me say I'm absolutely delighted that particularly the employment zone is now proceeding. This came up to council the day after I was elected at a by-election, if you remember, in December 2016, and frightened the life out of me having to vote on something that I knew nothing about. But time's moved on. So fine for the employment zone. But while I recognise that this application relates only to the approval of matters specified as conditions attached to the planning permission in principle, and that we're not here today to discuss the acceptability of the principle of the development itself, it would be remiss of me, I think, not to raise the fact that I have some concerns. I recognise that most of the sought conditions have been addressed, and I'm pleased to read of the provisions of the likes of the boundary landscaping, the provision of green areas, transport access, wooded planting in the fields south of the building zone, and compensatory planting. All good news there. My concerns, as you might expect, relate to the 249 units in total and the overall increase on our town's population that the impact this has. With, as I've said, 177 of the properties being either 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom properties, I think we can safely say we're heading for a significant increase, certainly over 1,000 people into Carnoustie by the time this development is complete. Our health centres are already overstretched, and the nearest primary school, I found out yesterday, is currently at 86% capacity, with only 67 spaces currently available. The planning formula of 0.23 children per property does not, with all due respect, make any sense here. 177 3 or 4 bedroom homes are scheduled on a property basis to bring no more than 40 children. Realistically, I think it's more likely to be something like 300. Otherwise, why would you be buying a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom house? It's suggested using the planning formula that the 249 properties might only generate 57 primary children. So I really, really doubt that. So while I welcome the 1.1 million contribution to education this development will bring, I doubt it isn't remotely enough to support the increased demand on Burnside Primary School and eventually Carnoustie High School. I think as well, Council should have imposed further Section 75 conditions to further contribute to town for further infrastructure improvements. And a final note, I really think this needs to be considered in all future large-scale housing developments in our towns around Angus moving forward. We're missing an opportunity here. I know we're following the regulations, but we're not looking at the bigger picture on our infrastructure, which is creaking all around Angus. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cheap. Any other comments?
Convener, we have Councillors Duff, Brace and Moore.
Okay, Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yes, I remember when this planning application appeared. I think it was the infamous meeting in Moneyfeith in December 2014. And I think it was quite controversial at the time. There was already a business development agreed for the other side of Carnoustie. But I remember at the time, all the Carnoustie members were very keen on this development, and I think clearly successfully persuaded the rest of the council to support this development against officers' advice. I have to say I had reservations at the time, but there's a lot of water gone under the ground since then. I have to say, I think Mr. Hunter's presentation was again excellent, and I think what it looks to me like a very attractive housing development. We're getting affordable housing early. We've laid on some bus routes, which is excellent. And we're getting an economic contribution to education, which Councillor Cheap has mentioned, using the council's formula. So I don't think we can jigger around with that. That would be quite wrong, I would have thought. And we're also getting employment land developed early, which was one of the desires of the Carnoustie members, addressing an issue in Carnoustie. So yeah, I'm delighted to see it. It seems to have taken an awful long time to have reached this point, but certainly wish it well. And I think it's a very positive development, I would think, for Carnoustie.
Thank you. Councillor Brace.
Yes, thanks, Convener. Yes, I think councillors have raised some very important issues here today, quite interesting ones. The grit bins and dog poo bins, you know, they're things that do cause a lot of grief for people, and the things that you might not necessarily think about. And I'm well aware of Councillor Cheap's concerns, and I think he does raise very good points. The comment I would like to make, though, is concerns the sort of colour scheme of the houses proposed. You know, I think it's really quite a bit of a step forward, you know, to have different colours, different shades. And yes, things have to fit in, they have to blend in with their surroundings, but we shouldn't set out to have everything being bland and dreary. And so I'm quite pleased with a lot of the aspects of this development, and in particular, perhaps, the number of trees that are going to be planted. Thank you.
Thank you. Was it Councillor Moore next?
Thank you, convener. Yes, I have slight concerns about the open space being generally overlooked. I believe any area that children play in and youths gather in should certainly be fully overlooked to avoid any sort of noise nuisance or public nuisance in other respects. But I have to say I'm delighted about the planting, both with the numbers and sizes of the trees and the timing of the plantings. I just trust that they will be native species. I wish the development well and look forward to the developer getting on with it as soon as the weather's good enough.
Yeah, really good.
Any other comments?
Councillor Duff has his hand up, but I'm not sure if that's still from earlier, convener.
Councillor Duff,
I
you
think it possibly
Yes, apologies, I didn't take my hand down.
No other comments, convener?
no. Well, no further comments. I'll be moving this report. At the very early stages, from you could drive down through Basket Skelly, I did have great concerns of taking away probably 30 odd acres of really prime agricultural land, which many young men would cut their hands off to get hands on it. But however, we have to move forward, and I've listened to all the comments made by local members and other ones, and I'm quite happy to move this report as what we're agreeing today is the conditions, which is in page 17 to 19 in the report. And so I'm quite happy to move this report. And as it stands, is that agreed? So therefore, planning application 19/00927/MSC is approved. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. I will now vacate the chair and hand over to Councillor Nicholl for the next application.
Convener, I'll just ask one of the hosts if they could move you to the waiting room. If you just stay where you are and someone will do that for you.
Right, okay.
I'll just wait until he goes. Right. We'll move on to item number 7. Land adjacent to Abbey Bank House, Springfield Terrace, Arbroath. And the planning officer present the application, please.
Apologise for that, I'll unmute myself. Thank you again. This is a planning application, this time a full planning application that provides for the erection of 20 affordable houses and the associated development on land adjacent to Abbey Bank at Springfield Terrace in Arbroath.
This is Councillor Lumbeard speaking. I'm not locked out.
Convener, you were away. You're obviously back again. I'll just ask the host to confirm that you're away.
Yeah, that's him being moved back to the waiting room. I don't know. If someone's letting him in, I'm not sure why he's coming back in. 1 second. He keeps coming. He might be easier just 1 second. I'm going to move him out again. I don't know why he's coming back in again. But it's him in the waiting room again.
Okay, thank you, John.
Safe to carry on. Next slide, please. So this slide is an extract from the Angus Local Development Plan Proposals Map. The blue arrow that you can see identifies the general location of the application site itself, hatched in brown on this plan, identified as a safeguarded housing site. Thank you. So we're back to the local plan proposals map. As I say, the blue arrow identifies the general location of the site, and you can see the brown tone indicates that the site is safeguarded within the plan for residential development. Next slide, please. This shows the extent of the application site. Maybe just pick out a couple of features. We have Hayes Head Road just to the top of the slide, and we have Springfield Terrace just located to the right-hand side of the site itself. We have a number of residential properties in the vicinity. You'll see that there's three properties located to the left-hand side of the site to the southwest, identified as Springfield Bray, and I understand that we have occupants of at least one of those properties attending to speak to us today. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the general layout of the site. On the right hand, you can see a building block that's identified as building 1, and that building would accommodate 8 one-bedroom flats. You can see 2 accesses formed off Hayes Head Road, providing access to parking areas for those properties, and each of the flats has an outdoor drying green area located either to the side or to the rear of the building itself. To the left-hand side of the screen, we can see 3 buildings. Those buildings, again, containing flatted properties. We have 2 that contain, each contains 4 3-bedroom flats. That's 2 flats at ground floor, 2 flats at first floor in each building. And the purple building that you can see there is 4 flats, each containing 2-bedroom flats. So again, 2 flats at ground floor, 2 flats at upper floor. And again, you'll see that they have drying areas located either to the rear or the side on that drawing, with an access coming in off Springfield Terrace itself. Next slide, please. If we look firstly, this is the building on Hayes Head Road, 2-storey property, hipped roofs which are reflective of the properties on Hayes Head Road itself. Again, facing block construction, colour of that's to be agreed, but the indication is it would be a red sandstone type colour, reflective again of the nature of the area. Just draw your attention to the windows. We have windows in the south-facing elevation and windows in the north-facing elevation, but the 2 gable ends that you see there are blank. Next slide, please. Just the floor plan of that particular building. You'll see single bedroom accommodation, and we have, in this case, 4 flats on the ground floor and 4 flats at first floor level. Next slide, please. So these are the buildings at the southern end of the site. Again, 2 stories, this time gable end, more reflective of the general nature of the properties in the area. Similar finishing materials. Again, draw your attention, we have windows at first floor and windows at ground floor in both the north and south facing elevations, and blank gables at either end. Next slide, please. This is the floor plan for those particular buildings, and in this slide, just draw your attention to the internal accommodation. We have kitchen and lounge accommodation at first floor and ground floor, and those would face the properties to the south. So that's in the south-facing elevation, facing the neighbouring properties to the south. Next slide, please. Again, this is the 2-person type accommodation, the flatted accommodation, very similar in style to the properties that we've just looked at. Again, 2 stories with windows in the north and south facing elevations. And if we can move to the next slide to see the floor plan. Again, just draw your attention to the kitchen and lounge areas within those properties. Those are facing south, so facing towards the neighbouring properties to the south. Next slide, please. So if we look at those two distinct areas, we have the red arrow that identifies the northern extent of the site, yellow arrow identifying the southern extent. Next slide, please. This is the northern part of the site. Yellow arrow shows very roughly the location of the block of 8 flats, fronting onto Hayeshead Road, access onto Hayeshead Road for 2 parking areas. Again, detail of that agreed and acceptable to our roads colleagues. We have blank elevations facing the property to the west, a blank elevation facing the property to the east. So in general terms, this particular part of the development has little impact in terms of overlooking or impacts on the amenity of those that live in the area. Certainly the separation distances between buildings all comply with the council's design guidance. Next slide, please. And this is just a view looking along Hayeshead Road. There was a fairly substantial red sandstone wall here until fairly recently. I believe the wall was unsafe and taken down in consultation with colleagues in Building Standards Service just to ensure safety. Intention is for a section of wall to be retained, albeit at lower height. So this is retained, repaired, and provides some enclosure for the flats on Hayeshead Road itself. Next slide, please. And again, just looking at the overall layout and the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that particular block. As I've said, the separation distances to neighbouring property comply with the council's design guidance. We have parking provision that again meets with the council's requirements and is acceptable to our colleagues within the road service. If we look at the left-hand side of the screen in this image, we have the 3 buildings, and you can see the 3 existing properties that are located just to the south of that. And if I can draw your attention to the numbers or that separate the buildings from the existing property. So we have a 2, a 3, and a 4. Now those are identifying the separation distances from the buildings to the boundaries of the properties themselves. Council guidance indicates that main windows in a building should be separated by a distance of 12 metres. In some circumstances that can be reduced to 9 metres where it's a particularly dense development, but generally a separation distance of 12 metres. In this instance, we're looking at a separation distance from windows in the building to the boundary of around about 15 metres, a minimum of 15 metres. So that exceeds the council's design guide requirements. There's also an indication in this slide of separation distances from windows in the existing buildings to windows in the proposed flatted dwellings. Now, in general terms, council's design guidance requires separation distances between main windows and other habitable room windows of between 15 and 20 metres. So in this instance, the separation distances that we're looking at all exceed the 20 metre distance requirement. The separation distances range from about 20.5 to about 25 metres. So in a circumstance where council design guidance is looking at separation between 15 and 20 metres, we're exceeding the higher of those levels. Next slide, please. And again, just an aerial view. Again, the yellow arrow shows very approximately the position of the 3 buildings that we're looking at. And you can see the north-facing elevations of the properties that adjoin the site. And you can see they do have windows, they have garden areas either to the side or to the rear. Separation distances, as I've indicated, comply with council design guidance. Maybe also just draw your attention to Springfield Terrace, which is at the bottom left of the screen. Just at the end of the orange arrow, you can see the small lodge building that's there at the present time. There are no listed buildings in the area. There's no conservation area. Demolition of that building is proposed. Demolition of that building is permitted development. So it's something that can take place without the benefit of planning permission. The other thing I draw your attention to in this slide is the properties at Wesley Gardens. Those are the properties that lie, again, just to the south of the existing 3 white properties that abut the site. So just draw your attention to the relationship between those existing properties and the neighbouring properties. And we'll look at that again as we move through the slide. But if we can move to the next slide, please. So here we have the properties to the south of the application site. They're at the right-hand side of the screen, the 3 fairly substantial buildings that we see here. And to the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the existing properties in Wesley Gardens. We have the driveway serving those 3 properties, and that driveway runs down the boundary with the neighbouring properties in Wesley Gardens. So it's a fairly similar relationship to the relationship that's proposed within the application site itself. The difference with the application site is the separation distances are greater. So this relationship that you're seeing in this slide is a relationship that exists in the area. We have upper floor windows within the neighbouring properties, the white properties that you see there, those upper floor windows overlooking amenity areas and within proximity of windows in the Wesley Gardens properties. The relationship is one which is similar to that which is proposed. But I want to be clear, the distances here are less than the distances proposed within the development site. The distances in the development site comply fully with the council's design guidance separation distances. Next slide, please. Again, this is just a sectional drawing through the site. Again, you can see the distances at 2, 3, and 4. That shows the general relationship between the proposed buildings and the existing houses at Springfield Bray that we've just looked at. The third image down there also shows the relationship between the building closest to Springfield Terrace and Abbey Bank House itself. So you can see that property sitting at a slightly lower level than Abbey Bank itself. Abbey Bank is it's not a listed building, but it is a fairly significant building within the townscape, within the street scene. So as you travel in an easterly direction or a northeasterly direction on Springfield Terrace, Abbey Bank does clearly exert a presence within the townscape, and the Block 4 building that you see there sits down in relation to that property itself. But just to be clear, separation distances between the proposed buildings and the existing buildings comply fully with council design guidance. Next slide, please. And again, this is just the layout of the site. Access arrangements from Springfield Terrace have been designed to meet the requirements of roads colleagues. You'll see that we have conditions that require the visibility sight lines to be provided. We have parking provision that meets the requirements of our roads colleagues, both for the development to the south of the site and the development to the north of the site. This is a proposal that complies with the council's design guidance. It's a site that's safeguarded for residential development, and the proposal is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Do any of the committee have any questions to the officer?
Councillor Durno, Vice Convener, and Councillor Moore.
Councillor Durno, please.
Thanks, Convener. I do have some concerns about this project. I note that the actual land at the moment is pretty unruly and it doesn't look very nice. I do wonder if maybe 20 flats going into that space is going to be too small, too tight, because I know that previous flats that have been built are...
What's he again, McDonald's?
the previous flats that have been built have taken a long time to build, and they have been sort of taking a bit of space up. And I just wanted, sorry, I just wanted to ask Mr. Hunter, are these properties, are the affordable housing, are they actually going to be sold to a housing developer, or are they going to be council houses? I'm not quite sure what the setup is with regarding this project. Can you maybe let me know?
Okay, so I think there are 2 points there. In terms of the number of units that are proposed and the density of the development, this is a site that's reasonably close to the town centre area of our growth. We have various developments round about East, West Abbey Street, Abbott Street. It's an area where there is a reasonably dense pattern of development where flatted developments are not uncommon. And this is a proposal that complies with the council spatial standards. It's flatted development, but the blocks of flats that are proposed are occupying not a dissimilar footprint to houses that were previously approved on the general site. So in spatial terms, we think this is acceptable. As I say, it complies with the council's design guidance. In terms of the affordable housing, yes, it's 100% affordable housing. It's development that's included within the strategic housing investment plan. So there's identified monies to see this site delivered. Members will appreciate there is a fairly significant requirement for affordable housing within the East Angus housing market area. My understanding is that the development is to be provided by a housing association.
Answer your question?
Yeah, thanks for that. It was just I wondered what was going on actually. I'll maybe make a comment at the end when I make up my mind about this. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Convener. I have 3 questions. The first one is that there are a number of comments about neighbour notification or lack of it. Can you please confirm that all the notification letters went out?
I understand there was one property that was not notified initially. Neighbour notification has now been undertaken fully in accordance with regulations. The application has been subject of all necessary publicity and consultation.
Thank you. And concerning blocks 2, 3 and 4, am I right in thinking they all face the existing neighbours and the central garden area is not overlooked?
When you say the central garden area?
Between blocks 2, 3 and 4 and block 1.
So there are windows in the upper floors of all of those properties, bedroom accommodation that would look towards the central area within the site. But the main living room accommodation in blocks 2, 3 and 4 all face south.
Thank you. And the last question, you referred to it being all complying with design guidance, but does design guidance cover new development living areas being at a level where they're permanently overlooking existing neighbours' bedrooms?
Yes, they do.
Right, thank you.
Is there any more questions to the officer? If not, we'll go on to the speakers. Sarah?
Yes, Convener, we have Mr. Burnett here to address the meeting today.
Thank you. Mr. Burnett, you have 5 minutes to put your presentation forward.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for allowing me to speak to you today. I'm not going to dwell on things that I've already raised, but I have highlighted some issues that I do have. I do feel the development is rather large for the scale of the site. The parking at the moment, we've already touched on that from your previous discussions at another development. At the moment, I can see 1 car per unit parking. Some of these are 2 and 3 bedroom flats. I think it's unreasonable to think that there will only be 1 vehicle in each of these flats. My main concern, I would have to say, is the road. I find it very concerning that Angus Council Roads Department have deemed that not to be a risk. I quote Councillor Wan back in September of 2017 after another fatal accident on this stretch of road. This is the 2nd major incident on this road, and it's now time to look at speed controls and a possible safe crossing. I'm taking this up with Angus Council immediately. Now that's Councillor Wan. Since then, nothing has been done to improve safety on this stretch of road. In fact, we've increased the risk by putting a lollipop crossing for the new school development on this stretch of road, and we're now contemplating putting an extra junction servicing 12 flats. I'm an experienced emergency responder and my wife's an advanced police driver. I can assure you exiting my particular lane at times is challenging. And I'm experienced in driving. I've had some near misses with pedestrians and cyclists because there is so much going on in that stretch of road. We're now going to have about 5 junctions within about 50 or 60 metres of each other. It's impossible to look in every single direction safely. So I have real concerns that Angus Council's Roads Department have updated this with a 2-liner saying they have no concerns. That baffles me completely. And I speak from somebody with a bit of experience in risk and road safety. Obviously, I have some concerns re the boundary area to the south of the development. I've raised this a number of times in some of the stuff I've suggested. Obviously, in current climates, we can't meet with developers or speak to them or work with them. I appreciate a development is going to go in there. However, I would like to know how that south boundary is going to be the green space, if you like, between us and the new development, how that's going to look, because at the moment we have quite a lot of trees in that area that are not on the drawings, which seem to be about 10 years old from what I can see that have been produced today. They're not current and the trees are not evident, and in applications there was no mention of trees being on the site initially, and I had to raise that with Mr. Mackenzie. So the current drawings don't reflect what the site looks like just now. As I say, so the boundary area, the green space between us, I have real reservations because I think that has to be done effectively to keep some kind of barrier or shield for us, because it is undoubtedly going to have these properties overlooking my garden area. So yeah, my main concerns are the road, the current boundary area to the south of the property, and creating an extra junction, I feel, is just to cram in more flats into this site. I think if more detail was put into this, there would be a way of accommodating a road coming into the site without it being an extra junction. There's already an access coming in from Abbey Bank House, and I think if there was more detail put into that, this would be done more safely. So these are my main concerns. Obviously, you know, the other thing is with the parking, there's 2 car park spaces that are actually right on the boundary of my property because of the layout of the design, which again to me shows that they're cramming too much in. The other blocks 2 and 3 have the car parking spaces in front of the new blocks, which I think is sensible. But as you can see from the drawings that have been produced today, the extra 2 spaces are put just basically on the boundary of my garden area. So I think it's too much for the size of the site. That's my honest opinion. Thanks for letting me speak today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burnett. Do any members have any questions for the speaker?
Councillor Moore, Vice Convener.
Councillor Moore, please.
Thank you, Convener. Mr. Burnett, or PC Burnett, as we tend to know you. You're saying about the parking on the boundary. Now, I'm just looking at the plan, which I don't know whether you've got it in front of you, but there seems to be a parking space that is just about on the junction. Now, in your view, would that be a dangerous place to park?
It's hard to say. I mean, obviously it's not. I mean, I'm sure Mr. Hunter will come in on that, but I mean, it's not going to be, you know, a majorly busy road, but there are 12 flats in there. You know, my concern and danger is basically the access coming from the new development onto Springfield Terrace. You're going to have a junction with Cliffburn Road almost directly opposite. You've got the hill going up to Seaton Road, which is a blind hill, and you've got limited access looking down to the south near to the doctor's surgery in Ponder Law, which actually turns a corner. So the issue is you do not have clear vision coming out of any of these junctions, you know, and sometimes you look one direction and by the time you look the other, someone has either come out of a side road, come over the top of the hill, you know, and it's not unreasonable to suggest to you at this meeting that cars don't always travel at the speed they should be. So, you know, it's more a danger, I think, going onto that main road where there has already been fatal accidents. More fatal accidents on this road than I would say in most others in the town.
Thank you.
Any more questions to the speaker?
No further questions, Vice Convener.
Do we have any more speakers?
No, that's it, Vice Convener. No more.
No more. Do members wish to make a comment at this stage?
Councillor Darnell.
Thanks, convener. Thank you, Darren, for your presentation, because that was some of the concerns I did have was with the road. And obviously the roads colleagues have said that it wouldn't be a problem, but I do feel that I have actually nearly had a crash there myself one day coming out, and somebody coming up that road really fast. So that is the concerns I would have. I'm totally with the property. We need housing in our road. We definitely need housing. We definitely need flats. We definitely need affordable housing. There's no a thing for that. We do need the housing, but I do have your concerns. And if the plans could be amended, that the road could maybe come out onto Hayeshead Road instead of coming out onto Springfield Terrace, I would feel happier with that, with the application going through. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Vice Convener. Mine's really not a comment, but I just wonder if it would be appropriate to ask a question of our roads colleagues in light of Mr. Burnett's points he was making.
Andy?
Yes, thanks, convener. What is the question, Councillor Duff?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm really asking the question because I'm not that familiar with the current layout of roads in Arbroath, and particularly the speed limits. I mean, is that road one of those that we have designated as a 20-mile-per-hour zone or not? I think it's at Springfield Terrace, which leads it to Seaton Road.
Yes, it's Springfield Terrace. I'm not quite sure whether it is one of the roads that we have designated as 20 under the COVID measures that we've implemented. It is currently a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. And right. the sight lines at the junction of the new access will be in accordance with the design standards of the council.
Okay.
We're speaking about 2 metres by 43 metre sight lines to be provided prior to the commencement of the development.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, convener, Vice Convener. Yes, while I can appreciate our roads colleagues and I can appreciate roads policy, I'm looking at this plan and you've Springfield Bray, you've got this proposed access, you've got a road the other side, which I can't remember what it is, an existing access to Abbey Bank House, and then Hayeshead Road in a very short space. So I'm concerned about that, especially as Springfield Terrace has a history, including fatals. Overall, I am not happy with this application. I support affordable housing. I believe that this site can provide it, but I will not support development where residents' living areas are overlooking existing neighbours' bedrooms. Block 1 is far enough away from buildings to be acceptable, the others aren't. In my view, blocks 2, 3 and 4 should be turned round so that the living areas are overlooking the central green space between them and block 1, and that they have got their bedrooms to existing residents' bedrooms rather than living at bedroom level. This was a problem I used to find in my last authority, and it's here, and I do not find it acceptable, so I will not be supporting this application.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Do we have any more comments at this stage? If not, I'm going to move that we approve this application by granting permission. Is that agreed?
I will move an amendment.
Amendment, fair.
I will move the amendment that this is refused.
There, you take note.
Vice Convener, you have moved the report. Would you have a seconder for that?
Do I have a seconder for this report?
I'll second it.
Councillor Brown.
Sorry, Councillor Brown. In terms of Councillor Moore moving an amendment, we just need some further detail and reasons for refusing.
On the access and the overlooking of neighbours.
Sorry, Councillor Moore, I require you to be more specific in terms of policy and reasons.
Oh, good. Found the policies.
I think if you were to turn to page 115.
Yeah, I'm just getting back to it. I want to do it on my personal laptop. Right, well, policy DS4, which refers to the effect and timing of traffic movement to, from and within the site, car parking and impacts on highway safety. And residential amenity in relation to overlooking and loss of privacy, outlook, sunlight, daylight and overshadowing. So it's that's policy DS3.
Sorry, DS4, Councillor Moore.
Yes, DS4.
DS4. Okay. Could I ask if Councillor Moore would have a seconder?
Seconder.
Councillor Durno.
Okay, I'll second if you need a seconder.
Okay, that's fine. If we're happy to move to the vote, I can certainly do that. The motion by Councillor Nicholl, seconded by Councillor Brown, is to approve the application as detailed in the report. The amendment by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Durno, is to refuse the application as the proposal is contrary to policy DS4 of the local development plan in terms of the effect and timing of traffic movement to, from and within the site, and the effect of residential amenity in relation to overlooking and loss of privacy. Please vote motion or amendment. Councillor Nicholl.
Motion.
Councillor Brays.
Motion.
Councillor Brown.
Motion.
Councillor Cheek.
Amendment.
Councillor Duff.
Motion.
Councillor Durno.
Amendment.
Councillor Fotheringham.
Amendment.
Councillor King.
Motion.
Councillor McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Moore.
Amendment.
Councillor Miles.
Motion.
The motion is carried by 7 votes to 4. The application is approved.
Then application number 20/00395 is hereby approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask the host to bring back Councillor Lungier, please?
There he is. I'll hand back to you, Councillor Convener Lungier.
Right, thank you. So welcome back. Move on to agenda item number 8 on our agenda today. This deals with the board deals with planning application for the formation of roof lights on the front roof plane and attic conversion to form habitation at 16A Seagate at Broth. Could we have the slides, please?
Thank you again, Convener. Again, this is an application for full planning permission, this time for the formation of roof lights on the front elevation of a property at 16A Seagate in Arbroath. We can have the next slide, please. This slide just shows the general location of the application site. You can see the site edged in red in this plan, located within the Fit of the Toon area of Arbroath, so within the conservation area. and it's the upper floor of a modern building within the conservation area. Next slide, please. Here we see drawings of the property as existing. You can see the two images at the top show the front and rear elevation of the property. So two-storey property, very modern in appearance, horizontally proportioned windows, rough cast finish, and the penned detail going through the property. So we're looking at the upper westmost property within the building at the present time. Next slide, please. So at the bottom of the slide, you can see the proposed roof lights that would be added to the property. We have a smaller roof light to the west and a larger roof light to the right-hand side. And these would serve bedroom accommodation to be formed within the attic space of the property. Again, just to be clear, the internal works to the property themselves don't require planning permission. What we're looking at are the external alterations, so the provision of the two roof lights themselves. Let me just again draw your attention to the elevation shown with the blue arrow, and you'll note that under the two roof lights in the main south-facing elevation of the property, there are a number of existing windows at first floor level. And if you look at the floor plan drawing just to the left of the blue arrow, you'll see that those are serving lounge, kitchen and dining area accommodation. So that's the accommodation that's currently facing in a southerly direction, so looking towards Seagate itself. Next slide, please. We have a cross-section drawing provided by the applicant, and you'll see that that drawing shows in some detail the relationship between the existing upper floor lounge, kitchen, dining area windows and dormer windows in the property to the south of Seagate. Separation distance there is indicated at, I think it's just under 9 metres, around about 8.9 metres. So a little more than the width of the street separating the existing windows in the property and the dormer windows in the building to the south of Seagate. And again, you can see in that drawing, there's an indication of the views that might be available from the roof lights to be provided within the attic space. Now, the drawing there suggests there's very limited view of the dormer windows themselves. I would suggest there will be views. Yes, the indication is there'll be no view. I would suggest that's overly optimistic. However, what I would say is the existing situation that we have with the windows directly opposing each other is a baseline, and that's a baseline that we have to have regard to in making decisions in relation to the current proposal. Next slide, please. This is a view looking west along Seagate. You can see the two dormer windows in the property on the left-hand side, so that's to the south of the carriageway. And you can see the modern building, the brown rough cast property to the right-hand side of the screen. And you can see the existing windows in the upper floor, and you can see that those are looking directly towards the windows in the existing property at a similar level. Also suggest in this slide, you can get an impression that there are a variety of additions within the roofscape on Seagate, number of dormer windows. Also suggest you get an indication from the image here that the roof space of the application property is not particularly visible. It's not invisible if you stand directly opposite it. If you stand close to it on the south side of the street, you can see the roof. You can see the existing roof covering. You can see the existing Velux window that's there, and you would see the Velux windows that are proposed. What I'm suggesting is that they would not be particularly visible in the street scene, given the modern nature of the building, its style. The addition of those windows would not affect its character, and there would be very limited impact on the overall character and appearance of the conservation area itself. Next slide, please. This is, we have a couple of images that follow, which are provided by an objector, and these are views from the existing dormer windows in the property to the south. You can see from those windows that the roof space of the application property is visible. What I suggest here is that perhaps more visible within that image are the upper floor windows in the neighbouring property within the application property to the north. And you can see the very direct relationship between the properties. Next slide, please. Again, just the other image supplied by the applicant, by the objector, sorry. Again, the Velux window in the roof space will be visible. There will be potential for views from that roof light into the dormer, but I suggest that's nothing as significant, nothing as direct as that which exists with the present windows that directly face the dormer windows themselves. Next slide, please. Again, just an image looking this time in an easterly direction along Seagate. You see the relationship between the properties. You see the relationship between the existing first floor windows and those dormer windows. Separation distance there of about 9 metres. That doesn't comply with current council design guidance, but it is the situation that's common in this part of the town. If I can move on to the next slide now. Just an aerial view, you can see the application property itself identified by the yellow arrow. Just to the north of that, we have John Street, I think, and you can see similar width, similar separation distance between properties on the north of John Street and the south of John Street. Separation distances in the region of 8 to 9 metres. Again, just to the right hand side of the screen, I think it's Union Street, East Union Street maybe. Again, separation distances that are typical of what we find in this part of the town. The resultant relationship between the roof light windows and the dormer windows is not untypical of the pattern of development in the area. It's the baseline against which we should consider this. We have to have regard to the existing first floor windows and their very direct relationship with the existing dormers. Suggest no material difference in terms of impacts on the privacy of that property by virtue of the introduction of those dormer windows, and no significant, no material effect on the character or appearance of the conservation area. And on that basis, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you. At this stage, Sarah, that's okay. The picture sorted itself out now. Okay, right. Any questions to the officer?
Sorry, was that Councillor Moore? Councillor Moore, did you have a question?
No, just put my camera back on.
Okay, thank you. No questions, convener.
No questions. If there's no questions, we do have Mr. Stewart, objector. Mr. Stewart, are you with us? You have 5 minutes, Mr. Stewart.
Mr. Stewart, you're still on mute.
That fine?
That's it now.
Good morning. This is my first ever Zoom meeting, so please bear with me. The plans in the description of the works provided online during the consultation period were incorrect, as the unauthorised Velux was missing. The extract of the title deeds I've seen lists the roof covenants being in common ownership between the 4 flats. However, the titles have been recently updated. They should be amended and put to the planning department. Sorry. The revised plans provided on the 27th of January are again wrong, as they show the Veluxes to be roughly square, as the sizes provided confirm that the windows are almost twice as high as they are wide, and this substantially underplays the effect of the 8-foot by 5-foot roof window. This window is a foot longer than a king-size bed, and putting it another way, a foot longer than if you put your front and back doors next to each other on the roof. It is really important the plans and information provided at this time are accurate, and clearly we're all stuck inside with the pandemic, and the planners and the councillors need to rely on these. The planning advice note for roof lights advises excessive use of roof lights can create visual clutter. Also, it states that the roof lights should respect and complement the character of the area, not dominate or overwhelm the appearance of the roof, and that too many roof lights installed are larger and more numerous than necessary. Also, that within a conservation area, special care is required to preserve the historic character and appearance of the area. In my opinion, the application does not comply with any of these points within the guidance notes. Having toured the conservation area, which I have within the last week, what Mr. Hunter just alluded to is incorrect. There are no skylights, roof planes, or veluxes overlooking properties of a lesser height, none. The only velux in the whole area which overlooks a property belonging to the bedroom accommodation is the one put on the property opposite without consent. My wife and I are most concerned with the loss of privacy to the cottage. A couple of years ago, we had a problem as the applicant had erected a camera outside on the roof next to the unauthorised velux. I pointed out that to him, it was pointed directly to the south and towards our house, and there was a problem, particularly within the upstairs bedrooms. He clearly accepted this and removed the camera. As I'm sure you will appreciate, the thought of a new 8-foot by 5-foot window at a lower level fills us with horror. It also would give us a view from our bedrooms directly below into the flat bedroom, which we certainly don't want. As Mr. Hunter alluded to earlier, there will be sightlines here, and the sightlines also become immaterial if the veluxes can be opened. To build a huge window, for this to happen in Seagate is terrible, and in my opinion would ignore guidance in terms of the Planning Act, Development Plan and guidance notes. If a 40 square foot, 8-foot high window can be installed within this conservation area, approximately 30 feet, and as such, far shorter than the guidance notes that Mr. Hunter alluded to with the Springfield development, which is not in a conservation area, then this can be done any place. Our cottage is currently vacant, and we would welcome a visit from the councillors once they get amended plans, so they can see at first hand the effect this would have on our privacy and on the surrounding area, which is unique and should be kept that way and protected from overdevelopment and unauthorised works. Please refuse this application and also consider enforcement action against the applicant for the latest of unauthorised works to the property. This application breaches various planning advice notes. In relation to roof lights, it breaches at least 5 points. In relation to distance of properties, which is, as I know, advice notes 14, it breaches the distance between bedrooms. The property will be overlooked. There are no examples within the whole conservation area of a property being overlooked from accommodation above, such as this. I've gone around John Street and I've gone down all these areas and inspected all veluxes, all roof lights, all dormers, etc. I'm more than happy to defend that position to anybody here that has a question. Please inspect this property and please inspect it within this conservation area, which we should protect. Mr. Hunter did make a point about this being a modern property opposite. The modern property opposite, unlike other similar ones in Arbroath and Bank Street and Church Street, has been restricted to 2 stories height to minimise overlooking. The hard line that's been put in place he refers to as brown matches the tenement buildings nearby. The pane leading through to the recessed parking is so the parking is not increased, the parking problem is not increased in Seagate. The building as it is at the moment has been carefully thought out when it was developed in 1989 by Jackie Martin Builders. It is not a one-off. The fact that it is the conservation area and the Seagate and the historic nature of it and our privacy that should be protected. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Any questions to Mr. Stewart? Any questions to Mr. Stewart?
No questions, convener.
No questions. There's no questions. Comments?
Councillor Dunno, convener.
Councillor Dunno.
Right. I'd like to thank Mr. Stewart for his presentation. Very well done. His first time on Zoom. I think this application should be deferred because I do find it difficult, these properties, because they do have large back doors, but they don't have any front doors as well. And people do want to amend these buildings, but the streets are so narrow and they're quite dark in the winter. And I know people want to put in lights to make it nice and bright, but when you're looking onto other properties with so close, sorry, my words can't get out today, so closeness to the neighbours, that I think this should be deferred and revised, the plans, if the applicant wants to put it in. Okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
Councillor Cheap, convener.
Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yes, I do kind of agree with Councillor Dunn on this one as well. But I'm listening to Mr. Stewart and have concerns about the plans and the actual sizes that are actually being shown and appear to be planned to be installed here. Also, the fact that we have again the history of unauthorised development previously. So I would agree with Councillor Dunn that this should be deferred until a full and thorough evaluation is done, making sure that the plans actually do match up to the actual extent of the development.
Any other comments?
Councillor Moore, convener.
Councillor Moore.
You, convener. Yes, I'm not happy with this. I'm not happy with living overlooking bedrooms, but that's not within this application. As I've just done a quick calculation, and these roof lights will be 19.73 square feet. And I think that's too big. I think that is far too big. It is going to have a massive impact. It's going to be in breach of policy DS4 and TC4 in my view. But yes, I will support Councillor Durno's view at this stage.
Thank you.
Excuse me, is it possible to speak?
Other comments?
Excuse me, is it possible to speak?
No, you had your turn. That's finished.
It was just as something Councillor Moore said, I was just going to clarify.
No further comments, no.
Sorry.
Mrs. Cowie would like to come in terms of the suggestion to defer.
Who would like to come in?
Mrs. Cowie.
Okay, right.
Thank you,
Okay, Kate, you wish to come in?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to clarify the issue that Councillor Durno suggested a deferment of the decision. The plans have been checked by the planning officers, and we are satisfied that they show accurately the situation and the proposed situation. There are comments in the report of handling that make reference to the need for planning permission for internal works and how accurate the plans are in relation to that, and they're set out in the report of handling. But I think importantly, in relation to Councillor Durno's point, we need to be clear on a reason for deferral. That the councillors in the committee are either satisfied with the proposals before them, or they are not satisfied with the proposals before them. To defer would suggest that you would require further information, and as I'm suggesting, the officers have checked the plans that are before you and are satisfied with those. So a deferment to check the plans isn't necessarily going to give you any further information on that. So I just wanted to check the reasons for deferral to make sure that they are competent.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Any other comments by members of the committee?
No further comments, convener.
No further comments. No further comments. I've studied the support, and I will be removing the support for approval. The proposal is in accordance with the development plan. It doesn't give rise to unacceptable impacts on amenity or in the character and appearance of dwelling or wider area. It does not adversely affect the character or appearance of the conservation area. There is no material consideration that justifies refusal of planning permission contrary to the provisions of the development plan. So on those grounds, I will be moving for approval. Is that agreed?
Can I bring an amendment, please, convener?
Do I have a seconder for my motion?
Councillor Plum, yeah.
But is that Councillor? I didn't catch who that was, convener. Is that Councillor Nicholl?
No, Councillor Brown.
Councillor Brown.
Yes. Okay, could we have the amendment?
Okay, I'll bring it forward. I wasn't expecting to, but I'll do it. I'm listening to what Mrs. Cowie is saying, and I hear what she's saying, but I do have concerns, clearly. So under policy under DS4, loss of amenity, purely on that basis, I would bring an amendment to not to allow to the application to proceed.
So that is refusal.
Yes.
Do you have a seconder?
Yes, convener.
Correct.
Can I also add policy TC4 that it would adversely affect the residential amenity enjoyed by surrounding domestic properties?
If Councillor Cheap is happy with that addition.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Shall we go to the vote, convener?
Yes, just go to vote, yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm just going to get the policies up on screen. Okay, so the motion by yourself, convener, seconded by Councillor Brown, is to approve the application as detailed in the report. The amendment by Councillor Cheek, seconded by Councillor Moore, is to refuse the application as the policy is contrary to policies DS4 and TC4 of the local development plan, particularly in terms of amenity and the effect the residential amenity, would adversely affect the residential amenity enjoyed by the house or surrounding domestic properties. Please vote motion or amendment, convener.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl.
Motion.
Councillor Braze.
Amendment.
Councillor Brown.
Motion.
Councillor Cheap.
Amendment.
Councillor Duff.
Motion.
Councillor Durno.
Amendment.
Councillor Fotheringham.
Amendment.
Councillor King.
Motion.
Councillor McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Moore.
Amendment.
Councillor Miles.
Motion.
The motion is carried by 7 votes to 5. The application is approved.
Okay. Therefore, application number 20000773 full is approved. Move on to agenda item 9. 40 Market Street, Forfar. This is for the change of use from office to a residential dwelling. Good, with the slides, please.
Thank you again, convener. This is an application for full planning permission for change of use of an office building to a dwelling at 40 Market Street, Forfar. Just to be clear, there are no objections from third parties to this application. There are no objections from consultees to this application. This application is before you because it's an application made by a senior member of staff within the planning service. Next slide, please. So this is just an aerial view that shows the general location of the property itself. Big yellow arrow shows the building subject of the application. For those of you familiar with Market Street, we have McLaren's Bakers a short distance to the right hand side of that slide, and we have the Plough Inn just a short distance to the left hand side. Now we see there's a garden area at the back of the property, and that's included within the application site. So it's the building and the garden area to the rear that are proposed to be converted to form the residential accommodation. Next slide, please. And this slide just shows the extent of the application property itself, the building fronting Market Street and the fairly sizable garden area located to the south. The property identified as number 11 at the bottom of that slide, I believe, is flatted accommodation with garaging and storage located at the ground floor, but predominantly residential in the surrounding area. Next slide, please. Building itself, traditional 2-storey stone and slate construction, reasonably attractive, lends itself quite readily towards conversion to the residential accommodation. There are no external alterations proposed to the building itself. The alterations proposed relate to purely the internal accommodation. If we look at the next slide, please. This just shows the existing configuration. We have office at ground floor, and we have further office accommodation at first floor. Next slide, please. And we can see the proposed configuration just shown in this drawing. We have lounge and bedroom accommodation, kitchen accommodation provided quite readily within the property itself. As I say, no external alterations proposed to the building itself. Next slide, please. Just a view looking along Market Street. Again, the rather indiscreet yellow arrow picking out the property. Residential properties at either side of it, so certainly no issues in terms of compatibility with neighbouring uses. Next slide, please. And this just shows the garden area to the rear. So a sizable outdoor amenity space to be provided in association with the property. Provides a good living environment, no issues in terms of change of use at this location, no issues in terms of impact on the amenity of people that live round about or the quality of the amenity that would be provided. Application complies with policy and is recommended for approval.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Any questions to Mr. Hunter?
No questions, convener?
No questions. Comments?
No comments, convener?
Well, I've been moving this approval. This is really just before us. This could have been done on delegated powers, but as this applicant is a member of the backroom planning, better correct myself, it's maybe not the backroom of planning in case I get the trouble, but however, he's a member of the planning office. So I'm quite happy to move this report as it stands. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Therefore, planning application 20/00783 full is approved. Move on to agenda item 10. There's a pre-application notice regarding housing development at Strathview. Is Forfar, if I can get it up. Alan, do you have slides in this pre-application notice?
Do indeed, convener. Yes, if you'd like to see slides.
Yes, we might as well see the slides.
Okay, as you've indicated, this is a proposal of application notice. So this is an indication from a developer that they intend to submit a planning application at some future point for a residential development of around 125 units on land at Westfield Loan in Forfar. Next slide, please. Just an extract from the Angus Local Development Plan proposals map for Forfar. And again, we have the orange arrow that identifies the general location of the application site itself. You can see the cross-hatched area of land that lies between Glams Road and Dundee Road in Forfar. That's a land allocation. That land is allocated for a development of around about 300 houses. And this proposal relates to a section of that overall land allocation. If we have the next slide, please. This just shows the extent of the proposed application site. You can see Westfield Loan just running round the top of that site itself. We have Dundee Road located just a short distance to the right. So around about 8 hectares in total area, as I say, proposal of about 125 houses. Next slide, please. Again, just an aerial view. We have Westfield Loan, Dundee Road picked out with the yellow and the blue arrow, and the orange line shows the extent of the application site. And you'll see at paragraph 4.5 of the report before you, it identifies the main issues that officers consider would be relevant to determination of any planning application that's submitted for development in this area. As I say, the land is allocated for housing development. The key issues in relation to this site are those picked out in paragraph 4.5 and in the associated local plan allocation itself. It identifies the supporting information that would be required to accompany planning application, and it identifies the key issues. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Any concerns, anything that the members would like to bring forward at this stage? No comment.
No member is indicating that they wish to speak, convener.
So, well, we'll have it before us, so it's just a case.
Sorry, Councillor Duff, convener.
Councillor Duff.
Apologies for my tardiness. I mean, I'm just quickly looking down the conditions at 4.5. I don't specifically see education being mentioned, and I would have thought that would have been, there would be some issue, I would have thought, with primary education in Forfar. Indeed, I have a feeling one of the developers on the west side were proposing a school as part of the development. I don't know if it's this one or another one, but I would have thought that was the biggest issue for me, I would have thought.
Okay, that'll be noted, Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, convener.
Any other concerns or comments at this stage?
Nothing further, convener.
No. Well, at this stage, the pre-application is before us and it's there for comment. So how do I finish this off now?
Convener, the key issues are contained within the report. So yes. If there's nothing further to add, I would suggest that members just agree to note those that are listed within the report with consideration given to Councillor Duff's point.
Yes.
Can I just intervene? At 4.5, we do have identified issues in relation to infrastructure impact, and we've indicated that includes impacts on the education estate. So that's something that's picked out in the specific local plan policy, and it's also something that's identified in the report itself. It's maybe just escaped Councillor Duff's attention.
So therefore we're noting the conditions in 4.5 and probably Councillor Duff's query about education, and it's there for everyone on the committee to make contact if they do have concerns about this at any time. Up to how many weeks before someone can correct me? 12 weeks, is it?
It's 12 weeks, convener, yes.
12 weeks, yes. Okay, so I'll just conclude our meeting for today. Is that agreed? You get the snow away from your doorsteps now.
Thanks, convener.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter and Sarah, for keeping us right today.
Yeah, a spare track for convener.
But thanks for Kate for keeping me right as well.